who were obviously brought in front of Congress, as well as for those who, the rest of America, who kind of stood by and in many cases watched it happen. It is still impossible for man to organize his social life without repressions, and the balance has yet to be struck between order and freedom. The witch hunt was not, however, a mere repression. It was also, and as importantly, a long overdue opportunity for everyone so inclined to express publicly his guilt and sins under the cover of accusations against the victims. It suddenly became possible and patriotic and holy for a man to say that Martha Corey had come into his bedroom at night, and that while his wife was sleeping at his side, Martha laid herself down on his chest and nearly suffocated him. This will happen in the play. Of course, it was her spirit only, but his satisfaction at confessing himself was no lighter than if it had been Martha herself. One could not ordinarily speak such things in public, as you can imagine. Long-held hatreds of neighbors could now be openly expressed and vengeance taken, despite the Bible's charitable injunctions. Land lust, which had been expressed before by constant bickering over boundaries and deeds, can now be elevated to the arena of morality. One could cry witch against one's neighbor and feel perfectly justified in the bargain. Old scores could be settled on a plane of heavenly combat between Lucifer and the Lord. Suspicions and the envy of the miserable toward the happy could and did burst out in the general revenge. We'll point out for your notes, this has often been read by juniors in high school as a play about peer pressure and the ways in which a group can make the individual admit to things that clearly the individual really didn't do, but the individual feels almost compelled to do so. Reverend Paris is praying now. I'm with you now at the bottom of 1129. Reverend Paris is praying now. And though we cannot hear his words, a sense of his confusion hangs about him. He mumbles, then seems about to weep. Then he weeps, then prays again. But his daughter does not stir on the bed. The door opens, and his Negro slave enters. Tituba is in her 40s. Paris brought her with him from Barbados when he spent some years as a merchant before entering the ministry. She enters as one does who can no longer bear to be barred from the sight of her beloved, but she is also very frightened because her slave sense has warned her that, as always, trouble in this house eventually lands on her back. Okay? Okay, we're now going to turn. We'll just go ahead and listen to the performance. Again, you're just following along as we now enter Act 1. Bottom of 1129.
Out of here!
Top of page 1130.
Dear child, will you wake? Will you open your eyes? Betty, little Betty.
Susanna Walcott's here from Dr. Griggs.
Oh, let her come. Let her come.
Come in, Susanna. Reverend sir.
What does the doctor say, child?
He bid me come and tell you, Reverend sir, that he cannot discover no medicine for it in his books.
Then he must search
Aye, sir, I have been searching his books since he left you, sir. But he bid me tell you, you might look to unnatural things for the cause of it.
No. There be no unnatural causes here. Tell him I've sent for the Reverend Hale of Beverly, and Mr. Hale will surely confirm that. Let him look to medicine and put out all thought of unnatural causes here. There be none.
Aye, sir, he bid me tell you. Speak nothing of it in the village, Susanna.
Go directly home and speak nothing of her natural cause.
Aye, sir. I pray for her.
God.
Uncle, the rumour of witchcraft is all about. I think you'd best go down and deny it yourself. The parlour's packed with people, sir. I'll sit with them.
And what shall I say to them? That my daughter and my niece I discovered dancing like heathen in the forest?
Uncle, we did dance. Let you
Abigail, I cannot go before the congregation when I know you have not opened with me. What did you do with her in the forest?
We did dance, Uncle. And when you leaped out of the bush so suddenly, Betty was frightened, and then she fainted. And there's the whole of it. We never conjured spirits.
Then why can she not move herself since midnight? This child is desperate. It must come out. My enemies will bring it out. Let me know what you have
Top
done.
of 1131.
Abigail, do you understand that I have many enemies?
I have heard of it, Uncle.
There is a faction that's sworn to drive me from my pulpit. Do you understand that?
I think so, sir.
How then, in the midst of such disruption, my own household is discovered to be the very center of some obscene practice. Abominations are done in the forest.
It was sport, Uncle.
Call this sport! Abigail, if you know something that may help the doctor, for God's sake, tell it to me. I saw Tituba waving her arms over the fire when I come on you. Why was she doing that?
She always sings her Barbados songs and we dance.
I cannot blink what I saw, Abigail, for my enemies will not blink it. I saw a dress lying in the grass.
A dress?
Aye, a dress. And I thought I saw someone running naked through the trees.
No one was naked, you're mistaken.
I saw it! Now, tell me true, Abigail, and I pray you feel the weight of truth upon you. For now, my ministry's at stake. My ministry, and perhaps your cousin's life. Whatever abomination you have done, give me all of it now. For I dare not be taken unaware when I go down before them down there.
There's nothing more. I swear it, Uncle.
Now let's pause for a moment and just point out, this is going to be a play where several times in the play, and by the way, you can get a sense that the reading that we're listening to is going to skip occasionally a couple of lines. So if you're reading along and all of a sudden you see that a line is not there, then just skip down a couple of lines and you'll see it. There's a bit of editing going on. But let's say it in our notes now. This is going to be a play where we will have repeated question and answer sessions like the one that we're having right now, where the question will be, tell me what you have done, or tell me the truth. And then an individual is left to have to either say one way or the other. Tell the truth, don't tell the truth. Let's write this down. It's going to be one of the important motifs of this play. At the moment when someone is asked, did you do X? That someone has to decide to say either yes or no. To not answer is tantamount to guilt, right? To admitting guilt. So in other words, if you don't answer, did you do X or Y? If you just stand there and X is the bad thing and Y is the good thing, then the assumption is you did X. If you don't say anything, so you're left to have to decide which is the worse or the better way to answer. So this kind of thing is going to happen. Now Abigail, let's just put it in our notes now. Abigail lies. Write it down. Abigail lies. She says to him, we were only sporting and dancing in the woods. We didn't do anything else. And as we saw already in the earlier background information, there was actually in the historical documents no actual dancing reported. It was just in the woods doing witchcraft. Abominations is the word that's used. So we now have a situation where, notice what she has just said. She says, there is nothing more, I swear it, Uncle. And so we're going to learn right away something about Abigail, okay? And by the way, let's just say it on page 1130 at the top. Just as Abigail enters, just to go back to what Arthur Miller's given to us. Paris is bending to kneel again when his niece, Abigail Williams, let's write it down, she is 17 years old. Now if you go back and do some research, you're going to see that she was actually much younger. 17 years old. A strikingly beautiful girl, an orphan, with an endless capacity for dissembling. That means lying. Now she is all worry and apprehension and propriety. In other words, she's behaving like, she's very concerned as she comes into the room. Why? Because Abigail Williams has something to hide. Let's write this down. This will be another major motif of the play. Most of the characters in this play have something to hide. They do not want to let other people know certain things. And of course, Abigail Williams does not want to let anyone know that she was in the woods doing witchcraft, naughty naughty, because she's trying to somehow resurrect certain evil spirits to kill John Proctor, her once lover's wife. Okay, so there's the plan. Notice she swears to him, I swear I did not do anything else. Let's go ahead now and continue to watch to see what happens next.
Abigail, I've fought here 3 long years to bend these stiff-necked people to me. And now, just now, when some good respect is rising for me in the parish, you compromise my very character. I've given you a home, child. I put clothes upon your back. Now give me upright answer. Your name in the town, it is entirely... What is it not?
I'm sure it is, sir. There'd be no blush about my name.
Abigail, is there any other cause than that you've told me for your being discharged from Goody Proctor's service 7 months back? I've heard it said, and I tell you how I heard it, that she comes so rarely to the church this year, for she will not sit so close to something soiled. What signifies that?
She hates me, Uncle. She must, for I would not be her slave. It's a bitter woman, a lying, cold, snivelling woman, and I will not...
Wow, let's pause for a moment now and make a quick observation. While we as an audience do not yet know who this person is we're talking about, this Goody Proctor, it is John Proctor's wife. And notice that Paris will say there's some kind of rumor going around that Goody Proctor, Elizabeth, won't come to church because she doesn't want to sit next to someone, notice the word here is, something soiled. In other words, there's something going on that you've messed around and you've slept or done something sexual with John Proctor. Notice Abigail's response when he asks about what's going on with Goody Proctor. By the way, let's just pause for a moment and note the interesting movement here. Notice this starts with what's wrong with my daughter Betty for Paris to what's going on with you, Abigail, because you are hurting my reputation, Paris says, in the town. 3 years I've been a minister here, and I'm trying to deal with these stiff-necked people. By the way, I would definitely put a note, stiff-necked people means they're stubborn. And we'll definitely see this in the course of the play. And then he turns to Abigail. He wants to know about what's going on with you and this Goody Proctor and this rumor that's going around. Now, interestingly, this will be our first chance to see Abigail speak about John Proctor's wife. Take a look at what she says. She hates me, uncle. She must, for I would not be her slave. It's a bitter woman, he says about John Proctor's wife. A lying, cold, sniveling woman, and I will not work for such a woman. So in other words, 2 things. Let's write it in our notes. Abigail Williams says, I quit her. She didn't fire me. And secondly, she says, this woman is a nasty woman who treated me really badly. Now again, we don't know as an audience who this woman is. It's not like we met her yet or anything. But hey, this is important, so write this down. The first time that we see Goody Proctor, Elizabeth Proctor, John Proctor's wife, this will already be in our mind, and we will be wondering, what kind of a woman is she? Now again, back to that, what we called earlier, psychological reading of this play, we will be asking about Elizabeth Proctor, and what kind of a woman is she? By the way, just jump over really quickly to page 1132 in that literature and context information and your social studies connection. Let's read together really quickly. History repeats itself. The Crucible was written in the early 1950s when fear of communism swept America. The fears were understandable. Eastern Europe and China had recently fallen to communism, but they were also exploited for political ends. In Congress, a Republican senator named Joseph McCarthy leapt into the limelight when he charged that the State Department had been infiltrated by more than 200 communists. Leading a Senate investigation, McCarthy repeatedly charged that those who opposed his hearings were themselves communists. Then he investigated them. The parallels between events in Salem, as Miller depicts them, and ongoing events in Congress at the time Miller wrote the play are clear and deliberate. And obviously to connect the literature as you read, look for important parallels between the Senate investigation and the events in the Crucible. All right, let's return now back. Paris and Abigail continuing to have a conversation about why it is the case then that she had to leave the charge of the proctors.
Not work for such a woman. My name is good in the village. I will not have it said my name is soiled. Goody Proctor is a gossiping liar.
Ann Putnam now is going to come in.
Mr. Putnam, come in.
It is marvel. It is surely a stroke of hell upon you.
No, Goody Putnam, it is...
How high did your Betty fly?
No, she never flew.
Well, sure she did. Mr. Collins saw her going over Ingersoll's barn and come down light as a bird, he says.
Now, look, you Goody Putnam, she never flew.
Look, you Anne. Betty's eyes is closed.
Why, it's strange. Ours is open.
Your Ruth is sick?
I'm not calling sick. The devil's touch is heavier than sick. It's death, you know. It's death driving into them, forked and wolfed.
Oh, pray not. How does your Ruth ail?
She ails as she must. She never waked this morning, but her eyes open and she walks and hears not, sees not, and cannot eat. Her soul is taken surely.
They say you sent for Reverend Hale of Beverly.
A precaution only. He has much experience in all demonic arts, and I
He
thought...
has indeed, and found a witch in Beverly last year. And don't you remember that?
Now, Goody Anne, they only thought that were a witch. I am certain there be no element of witchcraft.
No witchcraft. Now look you, Mr.
Now, Thomas, I pray you, leap not to witchcraft. They will howl me out of Salem such corruption in my house.
Anne, tell Mr. Paris what you have done.
Reverend Paris.
Now let's pause for a moment and make a couple of quick observations. Into this exchange between Abigail and Paris, we'll step now, I'm with you at the bottom of 1132, Goody Putnam and Thomas Putnam. Okay? Now these are two people who are going to factor importantly in our play, so let's get them in our notes. Notice we're told that Thomas Putnam, a well-to-do, hard-handed landowner near 50, will enter. Now, let's just point out right away two things about Goody Putnam and Thomas Putnam. They are both divisive people within the community, very opinionated, and right away we're going to hear what actually has happened. What has happened, Goody Putnam is convinced of it, is witchcraft, right? She says, in fact, that she knows that there was people flying through the air last night, and she calls it the devil's touch. Also, her own daughter Ruth, and Goody Putnam has lost a number of children to death already, her soul is taken surely, she is also ill. Notice Paris, he says, I am certain there be no element of witchcraft here. Okay? Leap not to witchcraft. Note the irony, of course, given that we have the assumption, the suggestion here, that Mr. Collins saw her going over Ingersoll's barn on page 1132. How high did she fly? Was the first question that Miss Putnam asked about Betty, to which Paris says, what? She never flew. So let's go ahead and write this down. The way to start a rumor is to start a rumor. Right? What do I mean by that? All you have to do is just say something and then people will start to repeat it, right? Now, of course, anyone as a junior in high school has already experienced this many times over in his or her life, yes? All you have to do to start a rumor is to say one thing and the rumor can get started. Notice Paris is very much opposed to saying anything about witchcraft, but notice why. I'm on page 1133. Leap not to witchcraft, he says. I know that you least of all, Thomas, would you ever wish a desirous charge laid upon me. We cannot leap to witchcraft. They will howl me out of Salem for such corruption in my house. So it is Paris' concern first and foremost that we can't go talking about witchcraft because I'll lose my job, which tells us already something as well about Paris. Let's read on page 1133 now. Miller's going to give us some more information about Thomas Putnam. A word about Thomas Putnam. He was a man with many grievances, at least one of which appears justified. Some time before, his wife's brother-in-law, James Bailey, had been turned down as minister at Salem. Bailey had had all the qualifications and a 2/3 vote into the bargain, but a faction stopped his acceptance for reasons that are not clear. Thomas Putnam was the eldest son of the richest man in the village. He had fought the Indians and was deeply interested in parish affairs. He undoubtedly felt it poor payment that the village should so blatantly disregard his candidate for one of its more important offices, especially since he regarded himself as the intellectual superior of most of the people around him. His vindictive nature was demonstrated long before the witchcraft began. Another Salem minister, George Burroughs, had to borrow money to pay for his wife's funeral, and since the parish was remiss in his salary, he was soon bankrupt. Thomas and his brother John had Burroughs jailed for debts the man did not owe. The incident is important only in that Burroughs succeeded in becoming minister where Bailey, Thomas Putnam's brother-in-law, had been rejected. The motif of resentment is clear here. Thomas Putnam felt that his own name and the honor of his family had been smirched by the village. I'm at the top of 1134. And he meant to right matters however he could. Another reason, by the way, let's just pause here for a moment in your notes and point out what we're saying. What we're saying here is that we have lots of people with grievances or reasons to be really upset. And they're going to take those upset feelings then forward. So let's write it down this way from the psychological side of things. What is the motivations for people to behave the way they behave? Okay. We're going to see that some of these are hurt feelings, some of these are financial, economic. I'm reading now at the top of 1134. Another reason to believe him a deeply embittered man was his attempt to break his father's will, which left a disproportionate amount to his stepbrother. As with every other public cause in which he tried to force his way, he failed in this. So let's write this down. Thomas Putnam is a man who is constantly